we have a celebrity in our midst. And as you can see, we're being filmed. They're filming a documentary. I'm sure Gary will talk a little bit about it. But Gary was born in Bay City, Michigan, graduated from St. Joe's High School. He and his wife, Lynn, have one son, Brennan. He retired from teaching in 2004 after 35 years in the classroom, 27 of which were at Kramer Junior High. While at Kramer, he developed an elective class on the history of rock and roll and put together Good Rockin' Tonight, the first multimedia textbook on the subject in the state of Michigan. In 2005, he started an online Hall of Fame for Michigan rock and roll artists and songs at www.michiganrockandrolllegends.com. The site attracts 50,000 visitors each year. He currently teaches rock and roll history courses through the Ollie Institute at Saginaw Valley and Rutgers University in New Jersey. Gary joined the board of the Bay County Historical Society in 2011. Big round of applause for Gary Johnson.
Thanks, Mike. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming out. I guess the first thing I've got to tell you is that author Daniel Ralston couldn't be here today. Daniel lives in California now, and he suffered a bad fall and required surgery on his forearm and is unable to travel. So he sends his regards. Now, back in 2015, he was living in New York, and he was actually researching the story of the fake zombies. And he came across something on the internet that I had discovered from a musician who was in a band signed to Bay City's Delta Promotions. It sounded almost too strange to be true, but he had claimed that two of the company's imposter zombies from back in 1969 went on to form the world-famous band ZZ Top. Intrigued, Ralston contacted me, flew to Michigan, and we worked together to dig up this incredible Bay City rock and roll tale that had been buried for nearly 5 decades. Daniel wrote the story, and it was published in BuzzFeed in 2016. It quickly became an internet sensation and brought a great deal of attention to the real zombies who had reunited and were touring again. There's little doubt that Ralston's story contributed to the band finally being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2019. And I'm here today to share the story with you. Now, some of you may not be that familiar with the Zombies. They are a British band inspired by the Beatles that formed in the early 1960s in the city of St. Albans, located about 25 miles north of London, England. After winning a beat group competition sponsored by the London Evening News, the Zombies signed a recording contract with Decca Records. Their first single, She's Not There, was a smash hit in the United States on Decca's Parent Records subsidiary label. It reached #1 on the Cashbox chart and #2 on the Billboard Hot 100 in December of 1964. Like other British invasion groups to have hits in America in the wake of the Beatles, the Zombies were sent to this country to tour behind their hit. The band's first live U.S. television appearance was on the NBC pop music show Hullabaloo, where they performed She's Not There in early 1965. This is that performance.
Well, no one told me about her, the way she lied. Well, no one told me about her, how many people cried. But it's too late to say you're sorry. How would I know? Why should I care? Please don't bother trying to find her. She's not there. Well, let me tell you about the way she looked, the way she acted, the color of her hair. Her voice was soft and cool, her eyes were clear and bright, but she's not there. no one told me about her. What could I do? Well, no one told me about her, though they all knew. But it's too late to say you're sorry. How would I know? Why should I care? Please don't bother trying to find her. She's not there. Well, let me tell you about the way she looked, the way she acted, the color of her hair. Her voice was soft and cool, her eyes were clear and bright, but she's not there. Say you're sorry. How would I know? Why should I care? Please don't bother trying to find her. She's not there. Well, let me tell you about the way she looked, the way she acted, the color of her hair. Her voice was soft and cool, her eyes were clear and bright, but she's not there.
It's kind of fun to look at those 60s music shows and the way they presented the music, and hullabaloo, they like to put the models up there, you know, next to the rock groups and so on, for whatever reason. Anyways, the Zombies' next U.S. single, Tell Her No, also became a big hit, peaking at number 6 on the Hot 100 in 1965. But plagued by poor management and declining record sales, the Zombies were nearing their end by late 1967 when they decided to record one last album. It was produced by the Zombies themselves at the Abbey Road Studios shortly after the Beatles had recorded Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band there. The Zombies even used the Mellotron John Lennon had left at the studio to produce the orchestral sounds heard on their Odyssey and Oracle album. Now, Beatle fans, you remember the Mellotron, that was the beginning of Strawberry Fields Forever. Now, Odyssey was misspelled by the man who designed the album cover, but it made little difference as the album, which is now considered a 60s classic on par with the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds, the album bombed in England. It was only released in America because of the efforts of musician Al Cooper, who urged his record company to release it here. And of course, it didn't sell here in America either. But strange things happen in the record business. And over a year after Odyssey and Oracle had been recorded, one of its songs, called Time of the Season, became a surprise hit in America, reaching number 1 on the Cashbox charts and number 3 on Billboard's Hot 100. The Zombies were suddenly in demand as a concert attraction, but the band had broken up. Lead singer Colin Blunstone was pursuing a solo career. The Zombies' 2 songwriters, Rod Argent and Chris White, were putting together a new band called Argent that actually became pretty popular in the 70s, and Hugh Grundy and Paul Atkinson had found other jobs. There was money to be made with the Zombies name, however, and this is where a Bay City company called Delta Promotions enters the picture. The founder of Delta Promotions, Willard Bill Kehoe, was born in Flint in 1930 but grew up in Gladwin, Michigan. He attended Central Michigan College, which is what it was called in the 50s, and after marrying Anna Brubaker in Gladwin, moved to Bay City in 1954 and worked in the office of the Chevrolet plant. Kehoe was active in community organizations, including the Knights of Columbus, the St. Patrick's Day Parade Committee, and the United Cerebral Palsy Association. He ran unsuccessfully for 3rd Ward Commissioner in 1957. He also ran unsuccessfully as a Democrat in the primary for state representative in 1958. He was a delegate to the 1960 State Democratic Convention, however, and his wife, Anna, was a member of the Bay County League of Democratic Women. Kehoe also started a number of short-lived Bay City businesses. His first was the Methods and Efficiency Engineering Company that he ran from his home. That was in 1957. In 1962, he opened Alert Industries on Garfield Street that manufactured and finished automobile and sports equipment. In 1963, he bought property in the Hampton Heights subdivision in Hampton Township and built this home at 529 Venetian Court. Kehoe and partner Gary Rivet opened Delta Promotions in September of 1964, sensing there was money to be made catering to the teenage rock and roll music scene. It had exploded during the summer, with 2,000 kids attending each of the Battle of the Bands competitions at the roll-air skating rink in Bay City. The company's plan was to manage and book young bands at the various dances and teen clubs in the Tri-City area. With Delta Promotions established, Kehoe's next business move was to form with other area businessmen the Euclid Development Corporation. The group explored the possibility of a year-round dance club targeting the 12,000 teens estimated to be living in Bay County in 1965. With partners A.J. Lemaire and William Weselek, the corporation purchased land at 377 South River Road and constructed the building that would become Band Canyon. The structure was unique in that almost all of the teen clubs around the state were established in previously constructed buildings that had once been VFW halls, movie theaters, armories, or in one case, a former funeral home. Band Canyon, on the other hand, was built expressly to be a teen club, complete with raised stage, sunken dance floor, a game room, and even a gossip room. Band Canyon was very successful for its first 2 years, as it presented national acts like Freddie Cannon, The Byrds, Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs, Del Shannon, as well as popular local bands including Question Mark and the Mysterians and the Bossmen. Delta Promotions also managed and booked many young Bay City bands including the Del Reys, the Mustangs, and the Epics at Band Canyon, and booked them at other venues as well. Kehoe's company even put out some records on some of its acts, like the Jayhawkers, on its own Deltron label. But the teen dance club craze had started to fade with the rise of the psychedelic era in 1967, which had replaced dancing with seated rock concerts all across the state. By 1968, Kehoe and his partners sold Band Canyon to new investors who renamed it The Lady. Delta Promotions then moved its offices from Euclid Avenue to this building on Tuscola Road in Portsmouth Township. It was large enough to provide a rehearsal space for the bands signed to the company, and its remote location allowed them to play loud music without disturbing any neighbors. During this time, Kehoe obtained a new partner in Jim Atherton, the manager of the popular Flint band Terry Knight and the Pack. After Terry Knight left to pursue a solo career, Delta Promotions began handling the career of the band that was left, now simply called the Pack. And that band featured the soon-to-be famous Mark Farner and Don Brewer. In 1969, Delta Promotions was also working with a new version of Question Mark and the Mysterians that only had one original member, lead singer Question Mark. Farner and Brewer were dissatisfied with how little money they were making with Delta Promotions and recruited Mel Shocker from the Mysterians, who they heard rehearsing at the Delta Promotions building. He joined them in a power trio that would later be named Grand Funk Railroad. Now, very few people know that Grand Funk Railroad actually came together on Tuscola Road in that building. Some of you might remember it as the old Leisure Living building here in the Bay City area. It was around this time that Delta Promotions came up with a scheme of promoting imposter bands of no longer existing groups to take advantage of the burgeoning market for rock concerts. Fast forward to October 2015. My friend Daniel Ralston met Original Zombies bassist Chris White backstage at the Saban Theater in Beverly Hills. This was on the Reunited Zombies tour, on which they played their Odyssey and Oracle album in its entirety. Ralston had brought his laptop along, and he pulled up this black and white photograph of 4 flamboyantly dressed young men taken in 1969. As you can see, the autographed press photo read the Original Zombies, but it only pictured 4 guys. The Zombies had always been a 5-piece band, and 2 were sporting cowboy hats, something the English Zombies would have never worn. He informed White that the 2 men wearing the hats were Dusty Hill and Frank Beard from the legendary Texas blues band ZZ Top, although the names Dee Cruz and Chris Page were scrawled over their images. There were in fact 2 different bands touring the United States in 1969, calling themselves the Zombies. Both imposter groups were managed by the same company, Delta Promotions, the owners of which insisted they'd legally acquired the songs of the Zombies and the other bands. It was an operation that would be impossible to attempt today, and perpetuated in an era without smartphones, YouTube, and the internet. A time when fans didn't have unlimited access to artists' whereabouts, or in some cases even know what they look like. In the history of American popular music, artists have often been seen as interchangeable by the industry that promotes and distributes them. In the doo-wop era, if a member of a popular group pushed back against a manager or a label boss, they were simply sent packing, with a new, more compliant candidate brought in to replace them. Over the course of their existence, the Drifters have had around 60 different members. It was in this climate that Delta Promotions took this exploitation to a new extreme, figuring out a way to tour and sell the Zombies and other bands without those bands or their fans even realizing the scam. As the British invasion spurred rock's cultural explosion in the 1960s, there simply weren't enough of these bands touring North America to meet the demand, so Delta Promotions made some up. Now, 50 years later, what happened with the Zombies is more myth than scandal, hazy details lost to history, with many of its principal players gone or forgotten. But in terms of sheer audacity and brazenness, it's a story that's hard to top. Before he joined Hill and Beard in the Texas band that passed itself off as the Zombies, Mark Ramsey was 18 years old and living on the outskirts of Dallas. He was good looking, he had a girlfriend named Vicky, and he loved playing guitar. During his senior year of high school, a Texas blues band called The Gentlemen came to play a school-sponsored rock concert featuring hotshot guitarist and future fake zombie Sebastian Seb Metter. The Gentlemen had scored a minor hit in Texas with their single It's a Crying Shame in 1966, when Metter was only 16 years old, and Ramsey couldn't pass up the opportunity to introduce himself. Ramsey remembers meeting Frank Beard later at a spot in Fort Worth called Pizza Inn, where they became fast friends. Beard knew everyone in the Dallas music scene and was noted for playing a drum kit with 2 bass drums, the mark of a badass drummer, in 1969. Beard was already friends with Dusty Hill, and he took Ramsey to meet the bassist. It wasn't long after that Ramsey got the call to join the Fake Zombies, which at the time featured Beard, Hill, and Metter. He isn't exactly sure how the offer came about and is unsurprisingly fuzzy about some of the details of that era. The 60s were consumed with the fascination of experimentation, Ramsey told Ralston. But Frank Beard was the one who approached me about joining. Frank Beard and Dusty Hill declined to be interviewed for Ralston's story, but Dusty Hill did respond to fact-checking questions by email via his manager. The very first time either ZZ Top member had ever publicly acknowledged involvement in the Fake Zombie scheme. Like Ramsey, however, Hill said he couldn't recall how the band got started and responded, "It was the 60s, man." Ramsey believes they were connected with Delta Promotions through someone Metter met on tour with his band, The Gentlemen. The players were told the operation was perfectly legal, according to Ramsey. As far as the Zombies, I was told they didn't exist, Ramsey recalled, that they were only a studio band. I was just excited and flattered. I'd only been playing for a few years, and the other guys in the group were pro level at that point. I didn't look at it as anything more than a chance to have some fun, hang out with some cool guys, learn some songs, travel, and earn a little money, he told Ralston. This is a little hard to believe, but as a warm-up for the Zombies tour, Delta Promotions asked the Texas Zombies to go on a short tour as a different, less successful, and also recently disbanded group called the Rose Garden. They were a Los Angeles folk rock group, or quintet actually, 5 people, who had a top 20 hit in 1967 with the song Next Plane to London. Ramsey remembered it being the only Rose Garden song they bothered learning. The rest of their set was blues. To everyone's satisfaction, a small run of shows in the South went off without incident. Audiences were apparently so starved for live music that no one confronted the fake Rose Garden, despite the fact that the real Rose Garden had a female lead singer. People did start asking where the girl was, but we did okay, Dusty Hill recalled. Ramsey, Metter, Hill, and Beard then headed to Bay City to meet with the Delta Promotions team, get photos taken, and start their run as the Zombies. They were told to use their own clothes for the shoot, and that's where the cowboy hats came in. The lack of repercussions on the Rose Garden tour emboldened them, so they decided to tour without a keyboard player for their Zombies gigs, and the keyboard was the lead instrument of the Zombies. Ramsey remembers Beard telling people that their keyboardist had gotten busted in Dallas and was stuck in jail. You'll notice that both Dusty and Frank are using stage names, Ramsey said of the signed promo shot, so it's almost like they knew something was fishy. Seb signed his real name like me, probably because, like me, we didn't think we were doing anything wrong. Tom Hocott was the first employee of Delta Promotions. He now lives in Grand Rapids where he plays music and lives a quiet life. He reluctantly agreed to meet Ralston at a Chili's outside of town to discuss his time with Delta Promotions. When they sat down to eat, he placed a manila envelope on the table. He kept his hand on it while telling Ralston the story of his involvement with the Fake Zombies. Before the decline of the major label system and the rise of the internet and social media, enterprising and less than scrupulous businessmen ran the industry with relative impunity, with artists serving primarily as commodities to be exploited. I remember Delta Promotions starting out pretty legitimate, Hocott said. Then Kehoe and Atherton started telling me that they'd acquired the rights to the music and the names of these bigger bands, like the Zombies and the Animals. I knew it was probably BS, but I guess I didn't care. I was happy to be working in music. Hocott is the only full-time Delta Promotions employee who would talk about the operation. Bill Kehoe died in 1990. As for Kehoe's partner, Jim Atherton, Tom Hocott heard a rumor he'd been shot to death in Grand Rapids a few years after Delta Promotions folded, but there is no record of this occurring. Attempts to locate Atherton have been unsuccessful, although this is a recent photograph of Atherton that I acquired from the wife of Mark Farner's son. So I'm still on the lookout if you see this guy. Delta Promotions was the first to take advantage of the Zombies void in America. The plan was simple. Find competent musicians, convince them that Delta was on the level, get them to a reasonable point of Zombies likability, and send them out on the road. Once the prep was completed, they'd send the bands on tour while Delta took a healthy slice of the profits. Bay City, quiet and isolated from any prominent record labels or magazines, proved the perfect spot to operate. Delta could work in relative obscurity, sending its bands into various areas to absorb the risks, while Kehoe, Atherton, and Hocott laid low. Although the fake Zombies from Texas were very talented and had a fine lead guitarist in Seb Metter, who played a flashy Gibson Flying V, the lead instrument in the British Zombies, as we said, was the keyboards of Rod Argent. Without keyboards, it made it nearly impossible to duplicate the sound of the band they were pretending to be. June 22nd, 1969 was a rough night for the Texas Zombies. According to the Saginaw News Reviewer, the band was especially disappointing, and the crowd began to leave during their fourth tune. The newspaper also said the band didn't sound like they did back when they were selling millions of records. According to the article, the change in sound was attributed to a complete transition of band members except for the bass player, who was supposedly an original. This account makes it easy to understand how a group of guys from Texas could breeze into town, calling themselves the Zombies, appear on local TV programs, play a show, and then leave pretty much without incident. Locally produced rock and roll shows were often a disorganized mess. Delta kept its operation simple. Hocott says the concert promoters in most cities knew they were getting fake versions of real bands. They operated as independent entities, each taking a huge percentage of the money earned. As for the fans who were getting swindled, Hocott says, when they were told, here's the Zombies, they bought it. Even the strange parts, like the fact that they were touring without a keyboardist. Fans often left disappointed, and the bands left town soon after. The less remembered, the better, Hocott said. Then these guys came along. Hocott opened the manila envelope and handed Ralston a stack of photos of the other fake Zombies. They are dressed in muted, vaguely psychedelic garb, ascots and striped trousers. It's closer to the look of the actual Zombies. But the second fake Zombies were a five-piece band from Marquette, Michigan, home of Northern Michigan University, and they featured keyboards. The band was made up of former members of the Excels, a Beach Boys-inspired band who first played at Kehoe's Band Canyon on August 18, 1966. They were a regional success during the mid-60s, recording a number of pop singles that charted on local radio. They were damn good, Hocott said. They were the perfect Zombies. If you heard them play Time of the Seasons, you couldn't tell the difference. They were so good that Delta Promotions felt comfortable in increasing the size and scale of the tours, including one show at Utah State University for a crowd of 10,000. The first bump in the road in the Delta Promotions scheme was a Rolling Stone article from December 13, 1969, titled "Zombies Are a Stiff." In it, original Zombies bassist Chris White chastised the imposters for taking money from our fans and dragging down our reputation. There's no information in the article about the fake band members themselves, but there is mention of a specific show on October 21st in Los Angeles at the Whiskey A Go-Go. As Chris White remembered it, friends of original zombie Paul Atkinson went to this gig and managed to get the imposters on tape. He had someone go along with the tape recorder pretending to be a journalist. They had a guitar player calling himself Hugh Grundy, the English Zombies' original drummer. They asked him why he was out in front of the band as a singer now, and he said in a fake Northern England accent, "Well, the boys wanted me out front and I'm the only original member." In most cases, Delta Promotions would claim its bands had one original member, as it did with the Saginaw News. When Rolling Stone contacted Bill Kehoe for comment in December of 1969, he claimed the American Zombies formed after the lead singer of the Zombies was killed and the other two guys left. Kehoe went on to brazenly inform the magazine that the current Zombies are the second incarnation he created. They're not a new group, they used to be the Excels, Kehoe told Rolling Stone. Although Bay City was mentioned in this first Rolling Stone article, it was still a relatively new rock and roll music magazine. At that time, it identified primarily with the hippie counterculture of the era, and Rolling Stone was not yet available at any store in Bay City. In 1969, the magazine would have only been available via subscription or by picking up a copy at a record store or a head shop in one of Michigan's larger cities. After Ralston's story had been published online at BuzzFeed in 2016, I kept digging and was finally able to make contact with members of the Excels, who we were unable to find before the story was published. The band had formed in the fall of 1963 at Northern Michigan University. They adopted the look, sound, and vocal harmonies of the Beach Boys, and they quickly became a popular attraction at teen dances and clubs, covering the top 40 hits of the day. They signed a recording contract with Carla Records in Detroit, and their single, "Gonna Make You Mine Girl," reached #1 on Saginaw's WSAM Super Survey in 1966. That was the same year they played Daniel's Den in Saginaw, the Blue Light in Midland, and Band Canyon in Bay City. When lead singer Clark Sullivan left the Excels for a solo career in 1969, the remaining band members were approached by Delta Promotions to tour as the Zombies. Terry Quirk and Gary Stockero were the only band members willing to talk about being fake zombies. In a phone interview from his home in Montana, Quirk said that Kehoe pitched all kinds of ideas to the band. He told them that he had copyrighted the name and that they would be the Zombies' backing band if the originals decided to come to America. Quirk said that they were kind of naive and stupid, and they swallowed Kehoe's pitch hook, line, and sinker. In a phone interview with Stockero from his home in Florida, he said that Delta provided them with a travel vehicle with zombies printed on the side for the band, and they traveled as far away as California to play gigs, including the one at the Whiskey A Go-Go. He also said that Kehoe provided them with a road manager and that they did some radio promos pretending to be the Zombies. Neither Quirk nor Stockero could remember exactly how much they were paid, but said that it wasn't much and that it wasn't enough to sustain the band. Quirk was married and had a child, and guitarist John Herrick was also married. After the Rolling Stone article came out, the band felt they had tarnished the reputation of the Excels that they had built up over the years. They became disillusioned with the music business, especially Delta Promotions, and returned to Michigan in the middle of their tour. I discovered that Kehoe and Delta Promotions were not exactly secretive in their recruiting efforts. The Woolies were a successful Michigan band from the Lansing area who had charted nationally with their cover of Bo Diddley's Who Do You Love in 1967. In an interview with band leader and keyboard player Bob Baldori in 2016, he revealed that he was approached by a Delta representative who asked him if the Woolies were interested in going on the road as the English band, the Animals. Baldori turned him down. Delta Promotions was also not above trying to recruit its own employees for the fake bands. Mark Sanders was a former member of the Rogues, a young Midland band that was the house band at the Blue Light, the city's popular teen nightclub. In a 2017 interview, Sanders stated that after he left the Rogues, he was employed by Kehoe as a talent scout. He was hired to check out area bands and to pass out information advertising Delta Promotions as a premier booking agency. Don't want to do that yet. Sanders said that Kehoe asked him if he was interested in joining the version of the Animals that Delta was putting together. Sanders, who had seen the original Animals perform at the Blue Light in 1966, felt that the offer was unethical and turned it down. He left Delta Promotions soon after. Backlash from the bands whose identities Delta Promotions had effectively stolen ballooned to the point that the company could no longer keep up its charade. The beginning of the end came when the fake version of the Animals created by Delta were confronted at a performance by the founder of the actual Animals, Eric Burden. The story was included in the front page article in the May 28, 1970 issue of Rolling Stone, written by their crack writer, Ben Fong-Torres. It was the first and only time Bay City was ever listed as the dateline for Rolling Stone. And according to the magazine's feature story, Burton had come to the show armed with a baseball bat. Tom Hocott remembered getting a phone call from one of the fake Animals recounting the same story. Eric Burden and a bunch of bikers chased them around and threatened him, he said. The Rolling Stone article also mentions the existence of another fraudulent Delta Promotions group, and this is the one that would finally lead to the company's undoing, the Archies. The Archies were a fictitious studio band comprising characters from Archie Comics, an entity controlled by Don Kirshner, who had also created the Monkees. Now, Kirshner was an excellent producer and a shrewd businessman. He took the popularity of the comic book characters and turned it into hit records like Sugar Sugar and Jingle Jangle. Hocott told Ralston that he believed the fake Archies consisted of members of a folk rock group called the Bluesberry Jams that just adopted the names of the comic book characters. While it might seem like this would be the easiest con to pull off for Delta, since there were no real Archies at all, that was not the case. Unlike the disbanded rock bands and their labels, Kirshner Productions was a well-oiled machine ready to take down any dubious claims to the music of its properties. "We've heard about this group and our lawyers are taking action," Kirshner told Rolling Stone. Kirshner's words in the magazine must have given Bill Kehoe cause for concern. Just 2 weeks after the article ran, a headline appeared in the Bay City Times, "Band promoter quits. Blast DJs Mafia. The article was Kehoe's attempt to get out in front of the controversy. In it, he expressed disgust and exhaustion with the music business, without mentioning the lawsuits and baseball bats encroaching on the Delta operation. We never represented to anyone that these were the same groups who made the records, Kehoe claimed. This, of course, was in direct opposition to the statements from disc jockeys and promoters in the Rolling Stone story, who said that Delta even provided phony affidavits claiming the bands featured original members. Later in the Bay City Times article, Kehoe turned his ire to the bands themselves. In 2 years, I lost $20,000 in the business. One of the groups wrecked a bus we bought for them, and some didn't pay us back the money we advanced them, he said, adding that his pet peeve is groups who cheat us every chance they can. When Ralston mentioned Kehoe's claim, Mark Ramsey responded, "I was making $200 a week, and it wasn't like we'd play one night and then get a few days off. They had us playing shows every single night." After closing up shop, Kehoe poured his time into his legitimate business dealings, including a restaurant called Steak and Bake, and later a company called Liberty Technologies. Now, does anybody remember Steak and Bake, or am I the only one that remembers this restaurant on Broadway? Yes, Tim, okay. I think we dined at Steak and Bake. Well, look what you could get for $1.29, for crying out loud. A couple of young, hungry guys, it's a perfect spot.
Whereabouts on Broadway?
It's, let me see, it's down near where the old Mr. Hot Dog was. It was in that vicinity by the Coke plant, across the street on the other side of Broadway. I don't think the building exists any longer. It's something else, I'm not sure what. But I certainly remember it from back then. Kehoe's 1990 obituary does not mention his time working in the music business. It just didn't work out, he told the Bay City Times back in 1970. When all you do is lose money, there's not much to do but quit. But regardless of what others may have you think, at least I can quit knowing I stayed honest. And of course, the Bay City Times never followed up on the story. Didn't interview anybody who made these claims, just let it die right there. And that's why basically no one knows this story of the fake zombies. I'll tell you guys today, or unless you read it on BuzzFeed. With Delta Promotions dissolved under pressure from outside, all the bands on the Delta roster headed back home. Several of the former Excels had earned teaching degrees at Northern Michigan University and went into education. Others found regular jobs, and several continued to play music in the bars for several years thereafter. The Texas Zombies returned to Dallas, where they ditched their fake zombies past and returned to their normal lives. Seb Metter joined a band called the Werewolves, who made 2 albums for RCA Records. Sadly, he died of a brain tumor on January 24th, 1980. Mark Ramsey decided to go to college, studying to become a teacher, but kept his chops up in case Seb, Dusty, or Frank ever needed a guitarist. When Metter died, Ramsey gave up on the rock and roll dream. It just changed for me. He was sweet and kind, and I just kind of stopped wanting that life, he told Ralston. Ramsey now has a website called I Was a Teenage Fake Zombie. Several of the photos in this presentation came from Mark Ramsey's website. Of course, we know that Hill and Beard went on to form ZZ Top with guitarist and singer Billy Gibbons. They released their first album in 1970 and have since sold an estimated 60 million albums worldwide. In 2004, ZZ Top was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. the same year as Bob Seger. Mark Ramsey crossed paths with Hill and Beard a few times over the years before all communication eventually stopped. About 10 years ago, Tom Hocott claimed he tried to talk to Dusty Hill backstage at a ZZ Top gig in Grand Rapids. He hoped for a brief audience with Hill, of course, one conversation to fill in the gaps that still remain for him in the story, to congratulate Hill on his success, and to reminisce about the strange history that they both shared. But Hill turned Hocott away. He acted like he didn't even remember, Hocott told Daniel Ralston. Backstage at the Sabin Theater, Ralston asked Chris White if 46 years later any hard feelings remained. "No, not at all," he said with a laugh. "There's no bitterness there." The reunited Zombies, featuring lead singer Colin Blunstone and keyboardist Rod Argent, toured the U.S. in the fall of 2015 to promote their new album, which was called Still Got That Hunger. They were joined by surviving former members Chris White and Hugh Grundy to play the entire Odyssey and Oracle album in the second half of the show. My wife Lynn and I had a chance to see the Zombies perform that in New York City a couple years ago, which was a lot of fun. Right around the same time, Daniel Ralston saw and spoke to them backstage in Los Angeles. In 2017, the Zombies were nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame at long last, but were not voted in. They were nominated again in 2018, and this time they made it. In what can only be considered poetic justice, the Zombies will join ZZ Top and the other members in the Rock Hall on March 29th, 2019 at the official induction ceremony held at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York. Now, our closing video will present the reunited Zombies performing Time of the Season, the hit that got Bay City involved in their story so many years ago, and I'm sure one of the songs they're going to play on March 29th in Brooklyn.
It's the time of the season. Love runs high in the sky. Give it to me easy and let me try with pleasure. To take you in the sun to promised land, to show you everyone. It's the time of the season for loving. What's your name? What's your name? Who's your dad? Who's your daddy? Is he rich like me? Has he take on any time to show you what you need to live? Tell it to me slowly, tell me why. I really wanna know. It's the time of the season for loving. What's your name? What's your name? Who's your dad? Who's your daddy? Is he rich like me? Has he take on any time to show you what
Well, they've obviously still got it. And I think you can see the importance of those keyboards. All right, maybe you have some questions. Anything I can attempt to answer for you? Yes, sir, go ahead.
What did they do to fill in for the keyboard? Did the lead guitarist do a solo or something?
Well, you got to remember that they really didn't play that many Zombies songs. They might have learned, Time of the Season, She's Not There. And of course, all rock and roll songs can be adapted to different instruments. Remember, Santana covered She's Not There in the 70s, and had a big hit with it. It's just, it's amazing that they could pull this thing off, but they did. And again, it was a product, as we said, a product of its time. In no way you could get away with that today. Everybody's taking a picture of everything. What they ate as a snack at the concert. Nothing is nothing is too important. To put down on Facebook. Okay, any other questions? Somebody have any? Yes, sir.
I know that you mentioned that he lost $20,000, which is obviously just a deflection of the real question. Any estimation on how much they made over the years on these fake bands and?
I have no idea, but Kehoe is a real operator, and he pops up a little bit later, 1972, after he said he was all done with the music business. Well, actually, in '71, he started another promotional group called WERD, Word. Okay, remember, like, Word was a big thing back there in the late 70s, or early 70s, late 60s. That didn't work out at all. But in 1972, Terry Knight and Grand Funk Railroad got into a big legal battle because the band members in Grand Funk Railroad wanted to get away from Terry Knight. While that lawsuit was going on, Bill Kehoe gets involved in this thing, and he sues Terry Knight and Grand Funk Railroad, get this, for $56 million for breach of contract with Delta Promotions. Now, it was more or less a nuisance suit. It was settled out of court for an undisclosed figure, which obviously was much less than $56 million. Now, the thing that interests me is whether Kehoe used whatever money he got from that settlement to open his business, Liberty Technology, which was kind of like a janitorial business from what I understand. Because this is one of the businesses he opened that was actually successful, and it carried on after his death in 1990. His son operated the business from that point on until it closed, I think, in the early 2000s. But that would be real interesting. But my attempts to locate Kehoe's son, well, I can go into a story, but my wife is still mad at me because of what happened with that one, getting stuck in the middle of nowhere up in West Branch in the woods, trying to track down a non-existent address where supposedly Kehoe's son lived. So, I don't know. I'm still looking, though. I never give up on these stories. And if you're interested in more stuff about Michigan's rock and roll history, my website was up there. I don't know if it's... yeah, there it is. No? Okay, it's off. But if you're interested, if you just Google Michigan Rock and Roll Legends, it will come right up. And if you want to read more detail about the Bay City's fake zombies, I put all of this in writing, including what Daniel uncovered and what I uncovered. This is kind of like a quick summary, but if you want more details, if you go to the website, and there's a search box, and if you type in fake zombies, it will eventually come up down there. This is, it's a nonprofit site, so it is. It doesn't work as smoothly as some other professional sites out there that are making a lot of money. Okay, any other, Bruce?
The property and building, it was brand new. I wonder how much money it might have cost them to build.
The Band Canyon?
Yeah.
A lot less than what they're asking for right now. Terry Rosebush operated the old Van Canyon building for quite a few years here. He just recently closed his operation in Bay City and moved to northern Michigan. And so the building is for sale, and I think he's asking over $300,000 for it. I happened to meet someone who had the keys and who had worked with Terry Rosebush, so I got a chance here in December to take a walk through and see what the old Band Canyon looks like. It's exactly the same. You can see where the raised stage was, the sunken dance floor, the game room where they had all the pool tables and pinball machines is still there. The only thing that kind of changed, I think, were the offices in front and the old gossip room, which everybody tells me was just where all the teenagers used to go to make out, at Band Canyon. That was broken down into some storage areas. So, so it's still there. And if you want to drive, you can drive her in and take a look at it, Yes, ma'am.
I'm surprised it's in that good a condition, because I always thought it was kind of swampy down there.
The canyon?
Yeah, well, right. You had to go down to get there, but it's in remarkably good shape. And it looks exactly like it did. The sign that had the Band Canyon thing on there, it's still there. Of course, there's Terry Rosebush is on there now, but everything is pretty much the same. It's remarkable. It was, they did a good job in constructing it, definitely. It was built to last. Okay, anybody else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so did Keyhole get sued by Kirshner or any of them? Or was it just...
Well, when he closed the business and took all of the bands off the road, apparently they pulled the lawsuit.
Oh.
So he wasn't, he didn't apparently have to pay damage. I think Don Kirshner was making so much money that he looked at this as just a nuisance.
Yeah.
He just wanted to get him out of there, get him off the road. Okay, anybody else? Yes, sir.
You mentioned Terry Knight in the back. A lot of us have seen him in different places. Can you give us a little information on what happened to him?
Well, Terry Knight, of course, was very popular entertainer with his band, The Pack. They had a number of singles that weren't gigantic hits, but got on the Billboard charts, which is kind of rare for Michigan bands at that time. And he had one national hit with I Who Have Nothing, which was a cover of an old Benny King song. Terry Knight left Grand Funk Railroad. He had Illusions of Grandeur. He put together kind of like an orchestra that he would front. It lasted a very short time. But I'll tell you, he did one thing that was really interesting. He may have started, well, in fact, I know he did, he started the Paul is dead rumor. You remember that one, where this big rumor in 1969 that Paul McCartney had died? Well, that rumor got legs because Terry Knight had flown to England in 1968 or early 1969 to audition for Apple Records. Now, the Beatles had started their own record label, and they were interested in signing acts. James Taylor was signed to Apple Records. Badfinger, you probably remember them, signed to Apple Records, and numerous other people as well. So Terry Knight went there. He auditioned, but for Paul McCartney, personally. He did not get picked up by the Beatles, but on the flight back, he wrote a song called St. Paul. And when he got back, he had a deal with Capitol Records, and he recorded this song, and somehow he got permission from the Beatles. I don't know how he pulled this off, but he's got like 3 or 4 different Beatles songs, little snippets are in the in his song, in his recording. So anyways, some people started playing this, and this rumor started, and I think it started, if I remember correctly, in Ann Arbor, that Paul McCartney had died in 1966, and that the Beatles had covered it up, but they had put clues in their songs and on their album covers. Well, it started a national frenzy. You know, especially if, you know, you're smoking a few joints and you got out those Beatles album covers and, you know, listening to those songs, and there were all these clues that were supposedly people had. There's just a whole list of them. In fact, I did one of the early presentations I did here for Second Saturday was on the Paul is Dead rumor. Yeah, it's fascinating. There's been 2 books written about it. And of course, Paul McCartney is alive and well. But yeah, it was just an incredible story. So Terry Knight was involved in that. Then he managed Grand Funk Railroad and he literally took him to the cleaners when they broke up. He had rights to everything. You know, somehow all the money that they had earned in their first 3 years of existence just disappeared somewhere. And you know, the members of Grand Funk Railroad found themselves deep in debt. Luckily, they were able to still produce a lot of great music. I'm American, you know, we're an American band. Excuse me. We're an American band, and so on. Were recorded after Terry Knight. And the difference, if you're a fan of Grand Funk Railroad, when the records say Grand Funk Railroad, they're with Terry Knight. When they say Grand Funk, that's the post-Terry Knight band. So then, okay, I guess you wanted me to get into the stabbing. Terry Knight apparently got into cocaine with the downfall of so many people in the entertainment business. And at the end, he was living in Texas in an apartment with his daughter and her boyfriend. And her boyfriend apparently was abusive. And, you know, Terry Knight intervened in one of their fights, and the boyfriend pulled a knife and stabbed Terry Knight to death. And that was the end of Terry Knight. Of course, the boyfriend went to prison, but kind of a sad end for him. Okay, did I cover Terry Knight enough here? Yeah, all right. Probably went way beyond what you wanted me to say. I can go all night on this stuff. Anybody else? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thank you very much.